In this cool, dark room on an island with no electricity, there is food that is kept for months. Salted fish hanging from the beam overhead. Onions and squash resting on a stone shelf. A sack of dried corn in the corner. There is no fridge in here, no freezer, no hum of a motor anywhere, and none of it has gone bad. Food that keeps for months on zero power. My people have never owned a refrigerator, and we never went hungry for the lack of one. And here is a thing that should stop you, standing in your kitchen with a machine that runs day and night. The average American family throws away roughly $1,000 of food a year. Some throw away far more, buying it, watching it rot in the drawer, and carrying it to the bin. You are paying a machine to run around the clock, and it still cannot save the third of your food that dies in the door. On my island, we kept food for months with three things: salt, sun, and a cool, dark corner. No fridge, no freezer, no power bill. And I am going to show you how to bring most of that into the ordinary kitchen you already have. Now, one honest thing up front, because this subject deserves it, and I will say it again later where it matters most. What I am going to teach you is the safe part, the storing, the drying, the cool larder, the part that is simply good sense and has no risk in it. I am not going to teach you to cure raw meat in your garage, because that carries real danger, and it deserves real, tested methods, not a video. So keep that in your mind as we go. Principle first, and safety always. I grew up on the island of Sal, and Sal means salt, because the whole island is named for the salt we pulled out of the ground in the sea. In my grandmother's larder, cut back into the cool stone, the fish she salted at the start of the season was still good many months later, long after the boats had stopped going out. I thought, as a boy, that food went bad because that is simply what food does. It is not. Food goes bad because we keep it wet and warm. Take away the wet, or take away the warm, and most food will keep itself for a very long time. Exactly the way it kept my family fed through a dry season with nothing plugged into anything. Before this is over, I will give you the exact safe system, the cool larder, the drying, and the salt. The one thing you must never do, and what quietly replaced all of it, and why. This works in the house you already own. A cupboard, a corner, a box in the garage. A renter can start with a single shelf. Let me begin with a number that should make you angry. There are two costs hiding in the corner of your kitchen, and most people only ever notice the small one. The small one is the machine itself. A refrigerator runs day and night, every day of the year, and costs you somewhere around $150 to $200 a year in electricity just to hum along. And a chest freezer beside it adds more. It never switches off. It is, most likely, the single most constant draw of power in your whole house, working every hour, whether the shelves are full or nearly empty. But that is the small cost. Here is the big one. The average household throws away something like $1,000 of food a year, and by many estimates it runs higher than that. Think about what that actually is. You drive to the store, you spend the money, you carry the food home, you put it in the machine that is running all day to protect it, and then a third of the produce wilts in the drawer. The leftovers turn in the back, the bread molds, the berries go soft, and you carry all of it out to the bin. You paid for it once at the register. You paid again to keep the machine cold around it, and it still died. And it is not random where it dies. It is the fresh food. The salad greens that slump in 3 days, the berries that fur over, the herbs that blacken in a week, the half onion drying out in the door, the leftovers pushed to the back and forgotten behind the jars. The very foods you feel best about buying are the ones the machine loses the fastest. You are throwing away the healthy half of your cart on a schedule, month after month. So the machine did not solve the problem. It changed the problem. It made food last a little longer, yes. And at the same time, it taught a whole country a very expensive habit. Buy far more than you can eat. Trust the machine to hold it, and throw away whatever the machine could not save in time. The fridge became a place where food goes to rot slowly instead of quickly. That is the number that should make you angry. Not the $200 of electricity, the $1,000 of food you buy and bury every single year, while a machine runs around the clock and quietly convinces you there was no other way to keep it. On my island, we could not afford to throw away $1,000 of anything because we did not have it, and there was no machine coming to cover our mistakes. So we never let food get to the point where it needed rescuing in the first place. Let me show you what that looked like. Cape Verde is a scatter of hot, dry volcanic islands out in the Atlantic, off the coast of West Africa, and we import more than 9 out of every 10 bites we eat. On paper, an island like that should be the last place on Earth that could keep food. No cold, no spare. No pipe of cheap electricity to run a freezer. And yet the pantry never ran empty, because my people built the whole way they ate around keeping food without cold. It starts with the island I come from, Sal, which means salt. There is a place there, Pedra de Lume, where the sea has left its salt in the bottom of an old volcanic crater. And for generations that salt was pulled out by hand and carried across the islands. Salt was not a seasoning to us. Salt was how you kept the ocean's catch alive on a shelf for half a year. I stood in that crater as a boy and watched the men rake the white salt into pans while the heat came off the black rock in waves, and I did not understand then that I was looking at a refrigerator. A slow, sun-powered, hand-raked refrigerator that had fed these islands for longer than anyone alive could remember. So when the boats came in with more fish than the town could eat in a day, the fish did not go into a machine, because there was no machine. It was split, salted heavily, and hung in the sun and the salt wind to dry. And once it was dry and salted through it, would keep on a beam for many months, ready to be soaked and cooked long after the fishing had stopped. The corn was dried hard in the sun and stored in sacks, and that dried corn is the heart of cashupa. Cashupa is our national stew, the slow one every family makes, cooked from grain that had waited, dry and patient, for months. The beans were dried the same way, and all of it lived in a cool, dark larder cut back into the stone, out of the heat and the light, breathing slowly. I remember my grandmother's larder better than I remember most rooms of my childhood. It was dim and cool even at noon when the street outside was white with heat, and it smelled of salt and dry corn and onions. On the shelf there were roots and squash that had been there for weeks. Overhead there was fish that had been there for months. And a family ate out of that room, well, through the whole long dry season, with nothing in it running on power, because nothing in it needed to. That larder was the quiet center of the house, and it asked for nothing. No wire, no repair, no monthly bill. It simply sat there in the cool of the stone and kept us fed. Now hold that against your own kitchen. You have a cool climate compared to mine. You have a machine I never had, and I am not going to tell you to throw it out. A fridge is a genuinely useful thing. But if a hot, dry island with no electricity at all could keep its food for months with salt and sun and a cool, dark room, then your kitchen can surely hold on to most of the food you are currently throwing away. Back home, we did not fight rot with a machine. We just never invited it in. So here is the clever part, and once you understand it, half of what rots in your kitchen becomes something you can keep. Rot is not magic, and it is not bad luck. Rot is tiny living things, bacteria, molds, yeasts, eating your food before you can. And those tiny things need exactly 2 things to do their work: water and warmth. That is it. That is the whole enemy. Take away their water, or take away their warmth, and they starve and stall before they can ever get started. That gives you 3 simple levers, and every food-keeping trick my people ever used is just one of these 3. The first lever is to take the water out. Dry the food, in the sun, in the air, or in a low oven, until there is not enough moisture left for anything to live on, and it keeps for a very long time. Dried fish, dried corn, dried beans, dried fruit, dried herbs, all the same idea. No water, no rot. The second lever is to tie the water up so the microbes cannot reach it, and that is what salt does, and sugar, and a strong brine. The water is still there, but the salt holds it so tightly that the tiny things cannot drink it, and they cannot grow. That is the salted fish, the brined vegetable, the old salt box in the corner of every island kitchen. The third lever is to slow everything down, cool, dark, and airy. You cannot always take the water out of a fresh onion or a squash or an apple, but you can put it somewhere cool and dark and breathing, where the tiny things move so slowly that the food keeps for weeks or months instead of days. That is the larder. That is the cool corner. That is, in truth, all your fridge is really doing. It is just an expensive, humming version of a cool, dark room, running on power to do what a good corner of your house will do for free. Here is the whole thing the way I would tell a child at the table. Rot is a crowd of tiny mouths, and they need a drink, and they need it warm. Dry the food, or salt it, or keep it cool and dark, and you leave them nothing to drink and nowhere warm to sit. They give up, and your food keeps. Dry it, salt it, or cool it. That is the entire system. And notice one thing about all three. Not one of them needs power, or a factory, or anything you must buy again next month. Sun is free. Salt is a few cents. A cool, dark corner is already sitting in your house, doing nothing. The machine took a job that the sun, the salt, and the shade had done for free since before there were kitchens, and it put a meter on it. Now let me show you how to do each one safely, in the kitchen you already have, starting with the one that saves you the most and risks you nothing. The first and biggest is the cool larder, the fridge you never plug in. Somewhere in your house there is a spot that stays cool, dark, and a little airy, a north-facing corner, a basement, an unheated cupboard, a spot in the garage, even an insulated tote box in a cool room. That spot, for free, will keep an enormous amount of food for weeks and even months, and most people have simply forgotten to use it. Onions and garlic keep for months in a cool, dry, dark, airy place. Not in a sealed bag, but open, breathing. Potatoes, carrots, beets, and other roots keep for weeks to months in the cool and the dark, happiest packed in a box of sand or newspaper. Winter squash and pumpkins sit on a cool shelf for months. Apples keep for a long time, cool and dark, and so do cabbages, hard cheeses and cured. Dry goods hold far longer than the door of a fridge, which is too cold and too damp for some of them. Even eggs, if they are fresh and unwashed, keep for weeks in a cool larder the way my grandmother kept them. None of that needs a machine. It needs a corner you are not using. Add to that the things that already live in a cupboard and keep for the better part of a year. The dried beans and lentils, the grains, the flour in a sealed jar, the honey that never truly spoils, the hard cured sausage, the jar of kraut, and you begin to see how much of a whole kitchen was never meant to live in the cold at all. And here is the part that comes back to matter on the worst day of the year. A cool larder does not fail when the power does. The night a storm knocks out the grid, and every freezer on the street begins its slow, dripping thaw, the onions and the squash and the dried corn on your shelf do not even notice. The people who kept a larder never feared a blackout because their pantry was never plugged into anything to begin with. Now the rookie mistakes here, because they are what turn a good larder into a bin. The first is putting the wrong things together. Apples and some other fruit give off a gas that makes potatoes sprout and roots go soft, so you keep them apart. The second is warmth and light. A larder next to the oven or in a sunny window is no larder at all. It must be cool and dark. And the third is damp and sealed. Food that cannot breathe or that is stored wet will mold, so keep it dry and give it air. The second lever is to dry your surplus, so that the food you cannot eat this week does not rot. It waits. When you have more than you can use, a glut of tomatoes, herbs before they bolt, fruit going soft, chilies, a batch of beans. You dry it. A cheap food dehydrator does it in an afternoon. So does an oven on its lowest setting with the door cracked. So does an airy screen in a warm dry room, the old way. Dried tomatoes, dried apple, dried herbs, dried beans and grains stored airtight in a jar. These keep for many months. They take almost no space, and they turn the food you use to throw away into food you cook with in the winter. That is the drying rack my people used in a box on your counter. It is the same trick in every direction. String herbs and hang them upside down in a dry room, and they will keep a year in a jar. Slice apples thin and dry them, and a glut becomes a winter snack. Dry the last of the summer tomatoes, and you open a jar of August in the middle of January. The surplus stops being a race against rot, and becomes a stock you slowly build. The third lever is salt and fermenting, and here is where I keep my promise and slow down, because this is where the honesty matters most. Salt, on the safe end, is a wonderful, ancient tool. A cabbage packed in salt becomes a kraut that keeps for months in a cool spot. Vegetables in a salt brine become pickles that last. This is old, well understood, and safe when you follow a proper method. Do that and enjoy it, but hear me clearly on the other end of it. Curing raw meat and fish and home canning low-acid foods carry a real and serious danger, botulism among them, and they are not something you learn from a story about my grandmother's larder. My people cured fish in a specific climate with a lifetime of knowledge, and even then, with great care. So I am giving you the principle, and I am telling you plainly, if you want to cure meat or fish or can food, use tested, modern food safety recipes and methods made for exactly that, and follow them to the letter. And when you are ever in doubt about whether something is safe, this is what the fridge is genuinely for. Use it. There is no shame in the machine doing the job it is actually good at. The larder and the drying and the safe fermenting will already save you most of what you were throwing away, with none of the risk. Add it up. A cool corner you already have, a cheap dehydrator or just your oven, a box of salt. Almost nothing spent against a machine running all night and $1,000 of food a year in the bin. That is the trade. And unlike the machine, the cool larder does not stop working the day the power goes out, and you do not have to do it all at once. This week, find the coolest, darkest corner of your home and move your onions, your garlic, and your potatoes out of the warm kitchen and into it. That one change alone will stop the sprouting and the softening you have simply gotten used to. Next, catch your herbs before they bolt and hang a bunch to dry. Then, when you are ready, try a single jar of something salted the safe way. Each small step keeps a little more food alive and takes a little more work off the machine humming in the corner. So if food kept for months without a fridge for thousands of years, what happened? Why does everyone you know now trust one humming box to do all of it and throw away the rest? Nobody outlawed the larder. Nobody proved the salt box wrong. They were replaced, quietly, through the last century, when cheap electricity and the refrigerator and the freezer arrived in every home. And they were a real convenience. I will not pretend otherwise. But something was lost in the trade that nobody put a price on. When one cold box could hold everything for a week or two, people stopped keeping a cool larder, stopped drying the surplus, stopped salting the extra, and started buying far more than they could eat, trusting the machine, and binning whatever it did not save in time. The machine did not just replace the old ways. It replaced the habit of not wasting food at all. Not banned. Not disproven. Just replaced by a machine that runs all night and a habit of throwing away everything the machine could not hold. Now the objections, because I have heard them from every American who ever stood in my kitchen. I do not have a basement or a root cellar, you say. You do not need one. A cool, dark cupboard on an inside north wall, a shelf in an unheated garage, an insulated tote box in the coolest room of the house. Any of them will hold your onions and squash and roots for weeks. You are not building a cellar. You are finding the cool corner you already have and finally using it. Is this not unsafe, you say? Here is the honest line, and I will not blur it. The cool larder storing and the drying of fruit, vegetables, herbs, and grains is simply good, safe storage. There is no more risk in it than in your pantry today, and often less waste. The risk lives only in curing raw meat and fish, and in canning, which is why I told you to leave those to tested methods and, when in doubt, to the fridge. Keep to the storing and the drying and the safe salting, and you are on completely solid ground. I do not have a garden, or I do not buy in bulk, you say. It still pays you. Even with a normal weekly shop, a cool larder keeps the produce you always seem to bin, the drying saves the glut before it turns, and you lean on the humming machine a little less. You do not need a farm. You just need to stop feeding the bin. And one more that always comes up, will it not smell or draw pests? No, not if you keep it the way it should be kept, with the dry things dry, the roots in the cool and the dark, everything given a little air, and nothing left damp or rotting. A proper larder smells of onions and dry corn, the way my grandmother's did, not of spoilage, because nothing in it is spoiling. Pests come to wet, warm, forgotten food, which is the exact opposite of everything I have shown you here. So stand with me in that cool, dark room one more time, with the salt fish overhead and the onions on the shelf, and understand what it really is. It is not poverty. It is not the past. It is a kitchen that keeps its food instead of buying it twice. The fridge is a good machine. I mean that. But it quietly convinced a whole country of something that was never true, that nothing keeps without it, that food is helpless without a plug, that the only thing to do with the extra is to let the cold box hold it until it dies anyway. And that is simply not true for most of what you throw away. Your onions do not need it. Your squash does not need it. Your dried beans, your herbs, your apples, your kraut do not need it. They kept themselves for thousands of years before the plug, and they will keep themselves in a cool corner of your house right now, for free. The machine is welcome to the milk, and the meat, and the things that truly need the cold. But the rest of it, the roots, the squash, the beans, the herbs, the dried and the safely salted, you can hand back to the cool corner and the sun, and take a good part of that $1,000 a year out of the bin while you do it. Do one thing for me before you go. Tell me the one food you end up throwing out rotten more than any other, the thing that always dies in the drawer. Just put it in the comments. I want to see what people are burying, because I promise you, most of it has a cool corner or a drying screen with its name on it. If you are tired of paying to throw food away, then you already know what to do. Subscribe, because next time I am going to show you how an island that barely gets a drop of rain and has no rivers at all still grows its own food in nothing but black volcanic ash on the side of a mountain that smokes. The grocery store will not tell you that one either. There is a reason, and I will show you.